Autotakeover. This is a feature within Rundeck Enterprise, and it is basically when you have multiple nodes or multiple instances, I should say, of Rundeck running and how Autotakeover works. All of this is documented within our documentation. So if you go to the Rundeck Pro cluster portion of the documentation under Autotakeover, you can see all the details there. In particular, we're talking here about the heartbeat interval, the delay on checking that heartbeat. The way that Rundeck's clustering works is because we are agentless. We monitor the heartbeat of our Rundeck instances via the database. And so the cluster manager software is actually coordinating that, of sending those heartbeats and knowing all of the cluster members and that they're active and that they're actually running. So setting those parameters is as you can see on the screen, is documented there. So let's take a quick look at our cluster. I'm in a project that I'm calling Cluster Demo. And the first thing I want to go to is the actual cluster manager. And you can see we have 2 instances of Rundeck running. And currently I have all of my jobs scheduled to run on one member, just to make it simple for the sake of the demonstration here. And we can take a look at, here's all the jobs that I have running on that particular member. And I can click on the running box here and actually see the jobs that are currently running. So currently I've got this wait for file execution actually running. Let's go to that particular job. And we can take a look at this definition. So this is for demo. Basically, we have a couple of different jobs running here. I've got one that is creating a file. And then on the second one, I'm using this Nixie wait for a file to exist. And this is running, I believe this is running like every 5 minutes. And I've got it set up so that it runs, it'll retry. So, which is kind of key in this definition. In fact, let me take a look at the details within this job. So as I scroll down here, I'll show you the little script. We're just basically adding a couple of commands here. Then we run to see if this file exists. When it finds that that file exists, then it's removing the file. My previous job is creating a file and establishing it there in the in the directory. So down here, here's where I've got it scheduled to run. And then down here, this is kind of important. So I've got it set to retry up to 5 times and a retry delay of 15 seconds. So this is important because if the job fails, or this is part of knowing I need to try this again. So what I'm going to do is, while this job is running, I'm going to shut that particular container down. So let's go back to our activity, and job is actually running right now on a couple of hosts, and it's running on this particular member. So I can click on that and I can see that it is running on this particular container here. So what I'm going to do is go to my screen and I'm going to stop that container. And I know that that's the cluster 1 container ID that I just stopped. So this execution is still running. It's been running for 3 minutes. Now this will take about 1.5 minutes, according to the seconds that I have, or the time settings that I have set for the heartbeat to consider that this is inactive. All these settings again that are in the Rundeck config.properties file. And so it'll take a moment or two for this execution, which, and you can see now it's already noticed I was logged into that instance. And so now my load balancer is actually logging me into my secondary. So this is the same job ID. And when the line turns yellow with the squiggly lines like this, that just means that we are over our average amount of time. So Of course, one of the little features of Rundeck is that we actually calculate the average running time for every job, so that over time you kind of have an idea of how long a job takes to run. And if it's running longer than usual, you just kind of get this little indicator here. So this is still believes that this cluster member is alive. And what we'll see is, as I continue to refresh here in a moment, it's going to say cluster member is unknown. And I'll go back to my cluster manager here. So now we're seeing that the jobs that were scheduled and this cluster member is now unknown because I've shut it down. I can still click on the running because it doesn't quite know yet that it is dead. I'll go to this job again. And now we know that the cluster member is not active. So the cluster manager behind the scenes is recognizing that and is going to restart this job on another member that it knows is alive. So I'm expecting this job to eventually fail, and it will then kick off on another member that is alive. And it's good to have these delays because sometimes you'll have network issues that doesn't mean that the cluster member is actually down. So having those too short can sometimes just a small delay in your network, or something, you know, that's all of a sudden taking a lot of CPU cycles, and so your response times increase. So it's kind of good to have a little bit of flexibility in that. And now we have a failed. So you get this little icon here. So this job has failed, and you can see down below, retried as execution, attempt 1 of 5 on the member of the cluster that is alive. So this has been logged as a failed attempt, and all of the log output will also say that this is a failed attempt. So now when I click on the new attempt, you can see it's running on a different cluster member, and it is executing. Now, one interesting thing about this particular job, and I'll go back to the jobs here so that you can kind of see, is I've got 2 jobs, right? I had a wait for file, and then I had a write file. So the write file job is creating this file, and then we have this wait for, you know, it waits up to 5 minutes to execute, and then it removes that file when it finds it. And so these 2 just kind of go round and round. So the interesting thing about this is this particular job has not run locally on this particular node. So I do expect, even though the job is looking for the file, because the previous job didn't run on that node, and I'm doing kind of a local to that local file directory to create the file, it's not going to find that file there because that job was run on a different node. So anything that's done locally like that, you do have to kind of take that into consideration, that if it were to fail and you're doing something that pertains to a specific instance or a particular node that you're running on, and you do fail over, you have to remember anything that pertains to that local node may not, you know, it's going to run the jobs there, but anything that's particular to that environment, like a file like this, we do see a lot of users who will write temporary files as kind of a flag for the next step to go, or, you know, that kind of thing. So that's something to kind of be thinking of in the back of your mind for HA, or making sure when you have failover and that kind of thing. So let's go back to our activity here. And in fact, so here was our failure. The 12656 was the second try for that. And you can even see here that the 1257, the write for the file. So it was waiting. And then if you're going in sequence, the 12657 to write the file actually worked. And then this job was successful. And it succeeded. So that is how auto takeover works. Don, can we open it up for any questions about this particular point?
Hi. First question I've got, would it restart from the step that failed, or would it restart the entire job?
It'll restart the entire job.
Right, okay. So it would be better to write your multiple step jobs as multiple jobs?
Yes. Yes, it would. Yes, and that is a request that we hear of frequently, and that is something that we are working on to be able to retry within a particular step. So it's something we're working on. I'm not going to promise as to when that date might be that gets released, but it is something that we are working on.
Yeah, I think it's probably better to break your jobs down into smaller jobs anyway, rather than have mammoth jobs that look very complicated.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the next example I'm going to give for handling job failures is exactly around that type of topic. The best practice is to make your jobs as small as possible, and then you can incorporate all of those small jobs as job steps within a workflow. And that gives you a lot more flexibility when we're working with users in like complex environments and stuff like that. One of the first things we will notice and ask, can we fix this, is when we have these really large jobs that are all one step, and that can introduce failures within those jobs, and it makes it more difficult to kind of troubleshoot and things like that. So breaking them up into smaller jobs and then combining those jobs into a workflow is absolutely a best practice. This second um, demo here, I guess this is in my testing directory. So this is actually something very new. This is demonstrating a plugin that one of our co-founders, Alexander, wrote a couple of weekends ago in response to a user request. Because the problem that we were trying to work with was they were running Rundeck, but the database servers that they were running the automation against were really flaky. So these database servers, they estimated that they would fail about a quarter of the time. So 25% of the time, those servers would just not respond and the job would fail. And so very similar, they were asking, well, how do we restart the job? They had basically a series of 4 steps. They would run a job on this database server or multiple database servers, and that would take several hours to run. Then they wanted the second step to pick up when that job completed and the file existed. They wanted that one to pick up and run another job that also took a couple of hours to run. And so each one of these sequential steps had to be successful in order to get through the whole thing. And so if they got to the 4th step and the job failed because the database server wouldn't respond, it would want to restart the entire workflow. And so they were looking for some way to kind of, and even pertaining to Richard's question earlier, how to restart a job at the step. So we took a little bit different approach in that if we know that there's a high failure rate on the server, is there a way that we can just keep retrying that job on that server to make sure that it runs, so that the flakiness of the server isn't necessarily impacting the entire workflow? And so what we came up with is a plugin called Try Again. So what you're seeing here on the script, in the jobs here. So I've got basically a couple of steps here that I'm checking. So it's the entire, all of these steps that you see here are all encompassed in this parent workflow. So let's take a look at the parent and you'll recognize what we're doing here. So I'm going to run a step and I'm going to basically run a command. So you see we're using a plugin here called Nixie command try until. So this is a new plugin. I don't think it's even on GitHub yet because we haven't done a lot of full testing with it, but I can show you what it looks like. And in fact, this is also a good demonstration of how easy it is to write scripts or write script plugins. So the entire, so this, I've got it in this little try command directory. It comes in a zip file. So if you're not familiar with plugins, the node step, for example, is super easy to write these plugins. Again, Rundeck is loosely coupled. So these are not tight integrations. That's one of the advantages of using Rundeck. So in this, let's see if I've got this in my history here. Yeah. So basically, I've got this plugin. So this YAML file is just defining what you're going to see within the plugin itself. So we've got this string for max attempts. We've got a string here that we're capturing for the interval, the number of seconds we want to wait. And then we've got this command. So we're just going to take a command that you would do on the command line, but we're going to try it at the command line level, and we're going to keep trying it until we get a exit status of 0. And here is the actual script that we're running behind the scenes in this plugin. So any script that you write, Python, Bash, whatever it is, you can create a plugin around that so that you can share it with different groups within your company, or however you want to share that particular script. And so it gives it this nice GUI within this. So here, if let's edit this job so you can see what this plugin looks like. And forgive me for the slowness on Rundeck, because I've got all of this running in Docker on my laptop here. So here we have this nixie command, try until. I'm going to add a step. I'm going to scroll down. You can see all the plugins I have until I get to this nixie try until command. And here is, so this is exactly what you were seeing in that YAML file. You got the max attempts, you've got the interval, and you've got the command that you want to run. I'm going to cancel that, and I've already shown the script. So that's what we're doing here. So basically I just created a couple of jobs, try the first one, and then we're going to check to see if that worked. And I've altered the script that I'm running locally. So basically it's going to fail 50% of the time. So it's going to be a coin flip every time I run this command. So let's run this job. I'll just cancel editing here. I'm going to run this parent, because we figured if it's 50% of the time this job doesn't run, that would be a pretty good. So here we've already failed the first time. Let's see here, go back to my log output. So this is the internal. So and so I've got it working to continue to fail. In fact, I'm not even sure that actually, so here we go with the live demo possibilities that this didn't actually run correctly. Let me take another quick look at. Yep, so this is the script that I run to generate a random number and fail 50% of the time. Although I don't think my parent job is actually using that. My check steps are, though. Oh, and I may not have prepped this properly to actually run correctly. I think that is my problem here. So 50% on my live demo, positive fails. Step conditions. I'm not sure why exactly this is failing now, so I'll have to debug that. This failed on my second step. You can see this first time we had to run the second check step twice, and something on my second started, and my result code was a 1. So I'll have to troubleshoot that. So sincere apologies. I don't want to troubleshoot on a live call, but this is a configuration problem local to my environment, not necessarily a result of the try until command, because that log output from the first one, we kept trying that first one until it actually worked. We checked it twice.
Make that plugin available in GitHub, Tracy, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And people can try it out in their own environments?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just another way. Basically, that particular plugin, what we're doing is we're retrying the command that you're running. So this can take any command line command, and it runs it on the command line, and it keeps retrying that command on the command line until the job succeeds at the command line. And so then the response back to Rundeck is that the command ran successfully. So in an environment where we have, servers that for some reason are databases that maybe fail for odd reasons or kind of things that are really difficult to troubleshoot, kind of like this particular user was experiencing, where they had a server, they weren't really able to address the reason why that server was flaky, and wanted to have a way to make sure that the command would run, that the first file output was successful before they went to the next step, and have multiple steps within that workflow. This was one way to make sure that each one of those steps locally would retry locally before coming back to the workflow in Rundeck to make sure that it actually executed properly. So it's not a problem with the plugin. I think this is a problem with possibly my local environment. And so that's what I'll have to troubleshoot again before another live demo.
I was just curious if there's a way to set up a notification for all jobs on failure or success. I know per job there's a configuration, but as an admin for the tool and multiple groups are using it, I was just curious if there's a way that I could set up something to get a notification for all failures and not on the job basis.
So more like overall the entire, any jobs in any project?
Exactly.
Notifications. Yep. I'm not sure. I hesitate to say I don't think that there is. I think that that's kept at the job by job level. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. In fact, I was just looking because I have Slack shut down on my laptop, and that actually could have been the problem with me just running that particular job, that I didn't have Slack running. So no, I don't know that. I don't believe that that's a capability at the enterprise or at the Rundeck system configuration level. But I think that that's a great enhancement request, a great idea to have that. Because yes, especially as it grows within your environment and you have different people, different groups writing jobs and things like that, it would be nice to have visibility into that. Of course, with the cluster manager, you do get the ability to see all of the jobs that are running across all of your members, and to see that across, this should be on the schedule forecasts, apologies, for all of those projects. So this you do get to see. But no, I don't think there's a way to actually have that messaging done across that.
Got a couple of questions. So I'm struggling a little bit with performance of Rundeck. It's probably a local issue, but I just wanted to know, do you have any tips for troubleshooting, how to get down to the root cause?
Absolutely. check, how long have you had Rundeck installed and running?
A year, and I've not had it this bad. Throughout the day it's good and bad, and yeah, it's variable.
Oh, is it variable throughout the day?
Yes.
So usually we will point you toward your log files, how large are the log files and the history and things around that. But if it's actually variable throughout the day, I would check the amount of memory that you're devoting to Rundeck in the JVM, and especially if you have multiple jobs running at the same time. When it establishes those connections, those usually SSH or WinRM, that also takes up memory. So check your memory on the server that it's running or the servers that it's running on, and increase if it isn't getting enough memory, or maybe monitor that memory at the times when it does look like things are slowing down, because that is usually the first culprit of those kind of issues. Other things you might want to check, especially, do you sense that there are a lot of jobs running at the same time?
Yeah, there's hourly jobs, and what's the definition of a lot? I'd say there may be 5, 6, 7 running on the hour every hour.
Right. So memory is always the first place to check. Second place would be the throughput to wherever you're writing those log files, or if they happen to all be hitting like the same disk or storage at the same time. That also could be causing some of that if you don't have a lot of bandwidth between that.
Are they written to the database?
Oh, you have them actually going to the database.
I think so. So I've got a SQL Server instance that sits on the back of Rundeck, and I believe it's going to there, but I'm not sure. I can't remember how I configured it, to be fair.
Right. So the one thing about writing the logs to a database as opposed to something like S3 or Minio or something like that, is you can fill up your database quite quickly with log files. So you might want to consider looking at using, like an S3 or some object storage for that, if that's possible. And also, are you on the open source or on the enterprise?
Enterprise.
Okay. Absolutely. I would definitely reach out to our support team. And if you'd like, CC me, Tracy, TRACY @rundeck.com. And I'll help, I'll shepherd it and maybe give the guys in their support a heads up. But they troubleshoot that kind of thing all the time, any kind of performance problems. And we can figure that out really quick. That's also really usually pretty easily problems to solve as well.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And my second question was, we use a lot of Windows, and we've got some Solaris, but generally Windows, most of our automation has focused on that. And we've got Rundeck installed on a Windows server. We're on currently 2.3.5. I'm a bit reluctant to upgrade, but how easy are my fears unfounded? Is it quite easy to upgrade?
It is quite easy to upgrade. Are you currently running Rundeck on Windows servers, as well as are you running on Linux and then running jobs on Solaris or that kind of thing?
It's running. Rundeck is running on Windows as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, perfect. Excellent. And so you are using the PowerShell plugins, I take it?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. The upgrade approach, there's a couple of different approaches. You can upgrade Rundeck in place, and there are instructions on that. And again, we are absolutely happy to help with that. Another approach that sometimes I find is a little cleaner, especially if it's been running there for a long time, you could also do just a fresh install, especially if you're changing things like log files and things where you may be doing log files. But if you do a fresh install of Rundeck, and if you're going to change anything in the back end, then you can just export and import your projects into Rundeck. And that's a super clean way of doing it. But we're, well-versed in helping lots of users upgrade from 2.x to 3.x. There's a few things to do there. It's in the documentation, but we're also happy to help with that as well. So any kind of troubleshooting questions, anything that you might want to ask with Rundeck Enterprise, we handle all of those questions. Our support engineers, they're all contributors to the open source project. They're all engineers. We don't have tiers of support, so they typically will own a support request from cradle to grave and make sure that gets resolved for any of our enterprise users. So leverage them, CC me, and we can absolutely help you with that.
In the interest of time, do you do any sort of consultancy for an upgrade? As in, could you jump on one evening and help us through it obviously at a cost?
We don't do a lot of consultancy, but the reason why we don't is simply because it turns out to be easy enough that we just have found that it isn't something that's actually, that necessary to have to charge for upgrades and things like that. So, but happy to avail myself to help you out with that. Again, it's usually not a very complex, doesn't usually cause a lot of problems or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. Going from a 2.x version, depending on which version of 2.x did you say you're on?
2.3.5.
Oh, 2.3.5, so it's a little bit older. There will be some changes that are documented in the documentation around that, as I mentioned, but overall should be pretty straightforward for you, and we're happy to help with that. So, and like I said, I'm happy to help you with that, and we don't need to charge you for that.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll plan it in one evening.
Okay, excellent.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all my questions.
I've sort of got a question about log files. We're looking at running Rundeck across sites. So we have a site in Gibraltar and a site in Birmingham. Now we currently log to a NFS share on a NAS, but we can't write to that NAS from both sides. So we're looking at options that would allow us to have both servers able to run. Now I heard you mention Mini.io there, an AWS S3.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what the options are for logs being written. I heard the previous gentleman say you could write them to the database, but I can see the problem there with just the sheer number of logs that get written.
Exactly. Got a couple of storage plugins, the S3, also Azure Log Storage. You could implement your own log storage. Now, this type of plugin, as all of our plugins, are kind of a loose coupling. Some can be more complex than others. Most are very, very easy. That appears from looking at the documentation to be our two main options. Is S3 an option for you?
Not really. We do have a cloud AWS infrastructure, but these Rundeck servers are on premise. I have heard that you have a Splunk module.
Yes, we do.
Does that provide a Splunk login? So,
excuse me.
And is it in the way that one node could read the data out of Splunk?
I don't believe the Splunk works quite like that.
No.
It's the plugin from Splunk is on the Splunk engine side. In fact, I believe I actually, here we go. So if you go to splunkbase.splunk.com, you can find the Rundeck app for Splunk. So that's the plugin for Splunk. I don't think that's exactly what you're looking for to address that particular problem. And what I might have to recommend, just given my lack of depth on other possibilities for log storage, definitely reach out. I'm assuming you're an enterprise customer?
Well, we've been open source for
okay.
many years, and we've just been speaking to your guys about getting a an enterprise version because we're looking for the fault tolerance
Got it.
and the
Okay.
restarting jobs, etc. So
Are you in a trial right now?
I am.
Oh, you are? Okay, so the
Yeah.
trials come with full support. And so absolutely reach out to support and CC me, Tracy at rundeck.com. That's TRACY at rundeck.com. And I will dig in offline and find a solution for that.
No, great. Thank you.